Just watch Tamika Johnson get an offensive rebound and hit a turnaround fadeaway jumper. Insane.
Just
Five
my
foot
foot
three.
three things.
Oh, I have internet now.
Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 2 of WNBA Retrospect, our annual summer scouting series breaking down the pre-draft film of WNBA legends. Today we'll talk about Katie Douglas, who was the 10th overall pick in the 2001 draft out of Purdue. She made 4 All-W teams in her career, including 2 third-place MVP finishes. Let's talk all about it.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name's Hunter Cruse. I'm your Saturday host covering the WNBA Draft and Prospect Scouting. I'm joined by my co-hosts M. Adler and Lincoln Shafer. M covers the WNBA with a focus on player development in the game within the game. Lincoln also contributes to our WNBA Draft coverage here at the Next and Locked On Women's Basketball. We plan to talk about multiple prospects from this 2001 draft, one being Penny Taylor, but finding late 90s, early 2000s WNBA film is near impossible.
WNBL.
WNBL film.
Even harder.
If you know somebody that has VHS tapes that'll send them to us from Australia, we're interested.
Yeah, if you can
please send them to my PO box. I currently have enough Charlotte Sting and Cleveland Rockers VHS tapes to fill up God knows how many hours of work in converting them to digital. But I can backfill. I want to watch Penny Taylor when she was like
if you can
18
send
in
us
the WNBL. That sounds sick.
I mean, the 2000 season, you have 19-year-old Lauren Jackson and 19-year-old Penny Taylor going 1-2 in MVP voting. Of course I want to watch that.
Hunter, what did Penny Taylor put up in the WNBL like her draft year? Wasn't it like 21 and like 10 or something?
Yeah, just like nuts numbers.
Truly absurd numbers.
Not the player we're talking about today, though. We're talking about Katie Douglas.
Aww.
If we have some time later, we'll talk about Penny Taylor a little more. But Katie Douglas, 6 foot, guard, wing, whatever position you want to call her as, out of Purdue.
I would have guessed taller than 6 foot, actually.
She's listed 6'1".
My favorite thing is Wikipedia says 5'9".
Nowhere near 5'9". My first note is that she looks really big. She looks really big for a guard.
To be fair, part of that is the fact that Purdue's who they were playing at the 4 was generally the exact same height as Katie Douglas, and by the time it came around that they were playing Duke, they had coach. Sorry, it's really late when we're recording. What was her name? The coach?
Purdue coach, Christy Curry or Carolyn Peck?
No, the good one. Yeah, Carolyn Peck had. Yeah, Carolyn Peck had these small ball lineups where she would have Katie Douglas in at the 4, which is crazy.
And also defending the point of attack.
Awesome. Yeah, it worked, and also running the point. Like, it works really well. But she's at the 4, and the 5 that they had in the lineup was literally the same height as Katie Douglas. It's such a weird lineup. I love it. It works. Anyway, the point of this being, Katie Douglas did a lot of different things for Purdue, and I struggled to see her. I really struggled to see her doing any of them, whether that was her sophomore, her junior year, her senior year. I struggled to see her doing any of them at a level that wasn't like obviously standout. Like,
yeah, she's so good at everything. She has every secondary skill that you could ever ask for, and also averaged 20 points per game as a junior.
Yeah. and when we talk about developmental arcs, like, I don't necessarily know that I would say that Katie Douglas from her sophomore to her junior year improved, 7 points per game in terms of like scoring talent. But what you want to see is someone really flashing those ancillary skills when they're surrounded by, teammates that get better billing, teammates that are maybe better like pure scorers. She's playing next to, as a sophomore, she's playing next to that year's Naismith winner. Was it Wooden? I think it might have been the Wooden winner. Doesn't matter. Steph White averaged literally 20 points a game. And then you have Okari Figs also, who was an absolute microwave scorer of the kind of player at the one, but it was sort of built like a two guard. I would say Okari Figs up until DT was the best perimeter shot creator prospect in league history in those first, 8 drafts. And so you have Katie Douglas flashing these ancillary skills. She plays so well as that tertiary piece. And then once they're gone, she really steps up into that scoring role. And the efficiency just does not drop off.
And the other production doesn't drop off either.
Well, no. It takes a step up.
Yeah, as a junior and a senior, she averages 5.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 2.5 steals.
Like they have Purdue. It's for those of you who are maybe Hunter's age or even younger. If you're younger and listening to this podcast, I have concerns about what you're doing with your free time. But that's between you and your therapist. But as far as you might not be able, if you're that age, you might not be able to understand that concept that Purdue at women's basketball was legitimately for about a decade and a half was right up there with where UConn was at that period in time. A step below Tennessee, but right there with what UConn was, with what Duke was, with what UNC was at this point in time.
Old Dominion.
And exactly. And they have so much talent here. LA Tech at that point too. And they have so much talent at this point that you have, even when Katie Douglas is the number one after Figs and White graduate and are drafted, you have shining talent like Michelle Duhart. You have shining talent like Kamara, like Hearns and Camille Cooper. I believe it's Camille Cooper.
Yep.
That are just so good role players that you can really effectively move in and out of these roles. And they're to the point where, you can hand off the reins and she doesn't have to do everything. So when you're looking at those 4.5 assists, those 2 steals, she really benefits from the teammates around her. We're not talking about someone who is, as generational as like a 2010 4.5 2 line would suggest, but like not 2010, 25. But it really speaks to how well-rounded she is. And I'm going to stop rambling.
And what an interesting developmental arc to be recruited by Lynn Dunn and Nell Fortner, coached by Carolyn Peck for 2 years and Christy Curry for 2 years. But yeah, the thing that really pops with Douglas for me is that she's such a good passer, she's such a good defender, and she's so versatile on the defensive end. I think that I'd feel comfortable with her guarding 1 through 4, basically, in guarding on the ball, guarding off the ball, chasing around screens, helping on the weak side. Just like every secondary skill you could want out of an off-ball wing, she has in spades.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear. I think you don't have to watch very long. It's very clear, especially given some of Steph White or Kari Figg's sort of limitations for the amount of usage they were given. Katie Douglas is easily Purdue's best live ball playmaker her entire time there. If you see it through the lens of a point guard, maybe that's a little weird in terms of watching her, but for someone of her height, it's pretty crazy what she's able to do. When you watch her defending off the catch, when you watch her defending in space, when you watch her really in all these contexts, it really pops, like you're saying. And for me, I think what really caught my eye was, more than anything, just in relation to the skill set, in relation to the time period, was watching her drive. She's not a super advanced driver, I would say, just compared to everyone, but for that height, for someone who, is really definitely going to be playing the 3 in really any system. And for what she could do as a shooter as well, her handle was so advanced, and her nose for being able to find space. It's tricky when she has to lead the offense, but when you put her in an empty side, when you put her in a pick and roll, what she did at Purdue was genuinely like eye-popping.
Yeah, she just didn't separate that much.
And that's the limitation, I think. And you live with it.
To be a smooth off-ball shooter and to get to the free throw line the way that she did, combine that with all the other stuff, if she shoots at even a slightly below average level, she's like an all-star level WNBA player to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we're just screaming about upside.
So after the break, I want to talk a little bit more about how did this player go 10th overall in a draft, just understanding that more, and then also her development as a shooter as well.
Mm-hmm.
As the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So one thing I want
to start segment 2 here is just around her development as a shooter. And one thing I read from an old article was a quote from Figs, and she was like, okay, heading into Katie Douglas' freshman year, she was like, you need to take shots outside of 10 feet. She was afraid to take any shot that was not within 10 feet, and that reflects like her freshman stats. Only 4 3-point attempts. She ended her college career taking 3.7, which was a lot for the time. So her development as a shooter.
That's the
what are your thoughts on the mechanics in general and the projectability of them?
So, I mean, I think the highest compliment I can pay is, like you said, it's really visible how reluctant of a shooter she is. I had it in my notes from several games throughout that title-winning sophomore year. You can also tell she has no feel whatsoever that year for where the three-point line is if she's not like checking where her feet are before she catches the ball. So many times she'd like step back, catch the ball, and have both feet basically on the line. And I'm saying that's a compliment because you look at her form and you say, this really should be working. You take a step back here, it's going to go so well. There are some I would not teach this form. It's very easy to watch it and see why. I simply would not teach it. But if a player comes into my gym and they're shooting like this, if they're on my team and they're shooting like this, it's so consistent, it's so stable, it's so clean. There is no reason, I think, to change any bit of it. And it is just so nice. You have this with... I'll let Lincoln speak before I make a comment on Ukari Figs. Sorry.
She's got a very smooth shooting stroke. She moves off the ball well. Like, obviously there are some problems with, like, knowing where the three-point line is, taking the threes early in her career, but when you get to her senior season, she's just spotting up on the wing, and if she's open, she's shooting it. It's going in a lot of the time. It's a very smooth shot. She's taking these off movement, like 17-footers that just look so smooth. She's got great scoring versatility. So to have that mixture of off movement, mid-range shots, the spot up threes, the attacking the rim, getting to the free throw line, it's just very, very projectable scoring.
What I found really interesting was that, and this wasn't the point I was alluding to before, which I'll get to, but what I found really interesting is with what you were saying about that nose, that floater, that getting downhill, it's really rare that we see players who have this level of ability to get downhill and the actual like instincts and, no pun intended, drive to get downhill and get through their defender and can beat their defender so well, especially in the two-man game. You rarely see a player like that who also is like objectively just like I think a poor finisher. That was my read on her. I think she's okay with her dominant left hand. I really would never want to see her taking a righty layup, even though she hits a couple nice highlights at different points. It's just a rough process overall. And she has some issues those develop. Again, we can get to that when we talk about her processing. But it's just really nice because this is what we want to see out of players when we talk about Layla Filia, when we talk about like Bree Hall, when we talk about these molds of wings these days, when we say, look, their shot profile is what it is. And, we want to see you taking efficient shots. We want to see you have the nose to get downhill, not just for its own sake. You can have trouble finishing, and that's okay. But the farther you get downhill, not only do you make, in theory, easier shots to fix for a good development staff, but it creates a lot more defensive chaos, and that leads to much easier offense. And you see that with Katie Douglas. When you see her brain move when the game's playing, she has that sort of Tamika Catchings-like thing that we saw pop at Tennessee, where maybe she's not hitting a bunch of shots, she's not taking over game with her scoring, but she moves so much quicker than everyone else cognitively. Yeah. And I think because of what we were doing last summer, every time I see that, it pops, I add a grade to a player.
Absolutely. There's one play that I'm thinking of where she gets the ball on an outlet pass in transition up the left side and doesn't even think about doing anything but feeding the person who's out ahead of
Hmm.
everyone else, and it just pops. She saw that, and like before even realizing the ball was in her hands, the pass was on the
Hmm.
way. The quick decisions are so important, uh, especially for someone who's in that off-ball role, because if you're not making quick decisions with the ball in your hands, you can just kill an offense.
So I want to pose this question here. If you had to make the case or just understand why did she fall to 10, if you're putting yourself in the shoes of evaluators at this time, this is something I want to focus on with all the prospects in the series because it's easy to go, okay, good player, but what was the main concern that you think caused her to fall so far?
She's not a lead creator, and she's not a big.
I can make a sort of varied case here. I think part of it is in terms of what Lincoln was saying about that lead creator. I think it's similar to why Ukari Figs went lower than she should have, in notwithstanding the WNBL aspect of it. But Ukari Figs, like those several picks after um, Kelly Jolly Harper
Yeah, it
in
was like
the
36 or
WNBL like
something. Yeah.
98 draft, exactly. And the Ukari Figs you watch, it's very similar to Katie Douglas. Like if you put them into today's game, they would still be maybe the best perimeter shot creator on whatever team you put them on. It's remarkable. Ricardo Figs, highly underrated career, highly underrated
She shot
even
like
during her career with her usage.
51% from three her senior season or something stupid.
Insane. And like
Yeah.
you just watch the shots Ukari Figs hits, and this is one of the very few teams, the 99 title game between Purdue and Duke. It feels like an anachronism because there are so many players running a pick and roll and taking a three when their defender goes under.
And
It's
there
just
was still
remarkable
like
how
8 points in the first half of that game.
yeah, they just sort of got unlucky with the turnovers, but it's remarkable what they do, Hunter. And I think that's my answer is that's a big part of it. Is this is a skill set that I don't think is really valued at this point in time as much as we would value it today. I think the lead initiator and lead scorer I think is a big part of it. Just in terms of being able to get downhill and keep drawing a bunch of fouls and all that kind of stuff. We talked I'm literally looking at the notes here. We talked last year about why Kelly Miller went as high as she did. I think Ruth Riley, obviously I can make a case for like, hey, we're a Miami expansion team. We want someone who's going to like have more scoring highlights than like Katie Douglas is, even if they're worse. I don't think it's a good process, but I can justify it in sort of that way. But then you get into Svetlana Brasimova, you get into Marie Ferdinand Harris, you get into Coco Miller. I can't justify those. And I'd love after you're done to like just give the stat on career wins above replacement. But it's really hard for me to actually imagine at any point in time any of us looking at them and giving any case for those last three players.
Yeah, my number one note I have written down is the connector skill sets were so undervalued. I want to talk about more in segment 3 with just some prospects we've seen recently, what we look for now. But this is a type of player that, from my philosophy, this is just someone I value so much. But back in the day, I could see how they look at her not being this mega athlete, not being some generational shooting prospect like we've seen with other players. You're just in a middle ground, and if you don't have a way of having to put all the skills together, because like a lot of teams relied on winning with their top selections in the draft and just getting lucky later.
Yeah.
Katie Douglas is an exception.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about her in the series.
Well, and
Yeah,
at this point,
sorry,
the
go ahead.
league it's so dominated by bigs outside of that group in Houston, which is just an outlier in every sense of the word. Like everyone's trying to find a dominant big, and there's at least one in this draft. You get Lauren Jackson at the top, but everyone's trying to find a big because the game is so big oriented, big dominated. So someone who's like a secondary 2.5 offensive player and a lead defender on a good team is just not going to pop as much to evaluators at that point, who's playing the 2 or the 3.
And we'll talk about our WNBA career after the break, but like when we're talking about someone, hey, their position's a little undervalued, their role maybe didn't totally reflect exactly what you'd be doing, but you could very clearly see the flashes if you knew what you were looking for. This is someone who slots in so easily into different teams and is such a great glue piece. It's who does that describe? Someone who, as far as like a general manager, thrives on those players. That's Mike Tebow. Mike Tebow drafts Katie Douglas. Actually, I don't know if he does, but because I would need to bring that up. But he is the coach that brings her into all WNBA status.
Carolyn Peck drafts her.
Yeah.
Actually, she drafts her own player.
Orlando Miracle, right?
Yeah.
You know what?
But the point still stands. The coach that maximized this type of player was
yes, Mike Tebow was
T.
the point here.
For sure.
Yeah.
Carolyn Peck was also excellent, and I would understand why she would draft her own player because she saw how good she was.
Yeah, she knows exactly how good Katie is, having worked with her for 2 seasons, and has seen. I'm sure she followed that Purdue team very closely after leaving them after their national championship season.
Of course,
she knows how good she is.
Yeah,
she knew what Charlotte and Minnesota and Miami and Washington and Seattle didn't. Seattle,
yeah. They were between selecting her and their other option was Penny Taylor. Those are their 2 final people they were choosing between, and then they just went.
Can't go wrong.
But their rationale was just, I know Katie Douglas. I've only watched film of Penny Taylor, so I'm just gonna take the player I'm familiar with. Worked out pretty well though.
Pretty reasonable. Could have worked out. Yeah, works out either way.
But after the break, we'll talk about her WNBA career and more. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Game Time offers last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% on last-minute purchases for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Before we get into talking about Katie's WNBA career, I want to pose a question on if there's any players that she reminds you of in the modern day, just either prospects-wise, players in the W now. While y'all think, for me, whenever I was going through film on Katie, my number one thought was, I see why Stephanie White really likes this player, taking Layla Khan. Different players, but you look at the secondary skills.
Interesting.
Like Layla's obviously way quicker, just from a traditional athleticism standpoint, but the defense, the passing ability from someone with her size, and just the overall processing speed, I look at that and I'm like, I see why Stephanie White valued this skill set.
I'd like to do a lefty-lefty comparison, but my first thought was Alicia Gray.
I thought about that as well. Yeah.
I think you might be underselling Katie a little bit, but
I know.
we'll get there.
The passing's the big thing.
It's the passing. It's the passing.
Yeah, it's the big thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's the passing and the help defense.
Yeah.
It's
Her off-ball
not
defense was
1-to-1.
insane. I don't think we've even talked about that.
I will assuredly talk about that when we get to her W career. But yeah,
what grade did you guys have here?
So if this was today, I would have had a hard 6 on her just because of the level of projection needed on so many skills. I have faith. That's why it's a hard 6 and not a soft 6. But it's a lot of skills that we're projecting to come together in ways that we see flashes of but aren't consistent. For the time period, she in my mind is the flat out first very good wing prospect in WNBA history. Shamika Holtzclaw is a big wing. Shamika Holtzclaw is not playing the 2/3 in the way that Katie does. Katie, in my mind, is the first wing prospect, let alone utility wing. For me, positional value pushes it easy to a 7.
Utility wing on my notes. Shout out utility wings.
Yeah, I do have written that she's kind of the perfect off-ball wing.
Hmm?
It's like
Yeah,
I have a strong 60 grade.
See, yeah, for me, I have a 55 just because of the time period.
I'm
Just
curious because like, I get what you're saying because wings were less valuable then, but you need to start wings. You need to start a 2 and a 3 to win a title. Like you need starting players. I'm it's
that that
I
that
just
is
find
a
it too
starting
to
player though. That's like a
yeah.
median outcome from a starting player on a championship.
Well, yeah, no, I just find it interesting that you and I had the same thought, which is there was a heavy amount of difference in how this position is valued now and then, and we
Yeah.
went in opposite directions with it. Where I went with scarcity and you went with importance.
It's
I think
just
that's
like
really
an
interesting.
I just think the value. I just think like her going 10 just like is telling of
Oh,
the value of the skill set in general. But I think like you saw it with her WNBA career.
Coco Miller goes before her.
It took her a while to actually like get everything out of the skill set. Like she struggled like really
Yeah,
early on, early.
Sure.
I would, and I think that's a great segue. I think part of that is the Connecticut, the coach in Connecticut. If I remember correctly, Mike Tebow. I don't have this up in front of me. Mike Tebow, I believe, takes over Connecticut either before '03 or before '04.
It's
Like, can you
before
look
oh
up more?
03. Yep.
Okay,
So
so he takes over
Tebow takes
before
over in
'03.
2003 after in 2002 coached by D Brown still in Orlando.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So they move. Yeah. They move and they go through this. They're taken over by the Mohegan Sun tribe, hence the name change. The Orlando Miracle when they move. And in this process, you suddenly go from, Carolyn Peck's a good coach. But they don't get as much out of the team as you'd want for Hal. So having Keisha Sales, Taj, you get the point. Shannon Johnson, and when you get Mike Tebow, he is someone who I think what he's going to be able to do with this, and we see it. Not instantly. Like Hunter said, it still takes a couple years to get off the ground. I think she's really often running by 05, 06. 06, I think, is when, at that point, that is like the sure point where we're talking about a player who is, if not one of the best wings in the league, just flat out. This is when she starts getting those all W, all NBA, all W, all D awards. Lincoln,
Mhm.
what?
2006 is her first All Star season. She
Yeah.
finishes third in MVP voting. Uh, is first team All Defense in 2005 and 2006, and finishes top 5 in Defensive Player of the Year voting in 2005, 2006, and 2007.
Yep, and you can see this really start happening in '04, the second year under Mike Tebow, which makes sense. This is how player development works. Where you see these things start to connect. You see how good her rotations are on the backside of this team because of her athleticism. They're shoving Lindsay Whalen at the point of attack. I don't blame them. It's a very weird lineup for basically the entire time Katie's there. Katie is playing the 2 in Connecticut, despite being an inch taller than their 3. It's weird. They really just couldn't get a real 2 guard in the way that they probably planned to try to, especially with the way that Lindsay Whalen profiled, and they just kind of have to shoehorn Kate Douglas into this position that she's not great at. I think that's part of the reason why it takes longer. She has the usage of it too is just harder to deal with. It's a lot of creation in a way that we talked about. Like that's not exactly totally reflective of what you want from her. But it really starts coming together. You see the ancillary skills. The passing is so there. The processing speed is so there in '04 and '05. And the defense, like you said, it gets there. The backside rotations, and especially because you have to make a fair amount of them. But Lindsay Whalen's a really freaking smart player. Taj McWilliams is such a solid paint defender that she's not having to make up for a lot of issues as much as she is really able to fill in a lot of positive spaces. You get through what you're talking about in terms of Connecticut times. They go back to back WNBA playoff series. Kate Douglas really cements herself, and then she requests the trade to Indiana. And I think there, people knew who she was in Connecticut. We talked about the awards winning, third in MVP voting. But when you get there, it's lightning in a freaking bottle with her and Catch. And once you get, we talked about this in the Catch episode, but once you get to the point where Tammy Sutton Brown, I believe, gets injured, Ebony Hoffman leaves. Tammy Sutton Brown, I think, gets injured, and that's why they sort of turn to Lana Larkins, and they go to this, for the time, weirdly small lineup where Lana Larkins at the 5, Catch slides from the 3 to the 4, but suddenly the paint opens up for Catch. They slide Kate Douglas from the 2 to the 3, and that unlocks, the ability to use Freon January, the ability to use Shavante Zealous, the ability to use Erin Phillips, and there's another guard in there that I'm forgetting.
Brianne January. In the title season, it's Brianne January.
Internet's back. But yeah, they cycle them through and they're able to suddenly have more space, more operating room than what anyone has played with. And it's just, I get exasperated talking about this because it's just what you see from Catch and Katie in terms of the spacing and the processing and the playmaking is so exciting, especially once you put Beyond January in and you actually have like a real quality full-time point guard that unlocks that ability. And you can see what happens in terms of the
They win a
offense.
title like immediately.
They win a title like immediately, and unfortunately, Katie Douglas gets hurt in the middle of the semis and doesn't play until I think what at the time and for many years after. Unfortunately, it's underrated now, but it really one of the most iconic moments in league history. Katie Douglas suffers a bad injury in the semis. She just cannot play flat out. She tries so bad. She can't get cleared for the final. She checks in for the last about 10 seconds of game 5 as they win. And I believe it was over Minnesota. And she checks in, thunderous applause, standing ovation. And it is truly one of the most remarkable moments, I think, in league history. And yeah, that's just how that career plays out. And I think it's a little bit of outlier development. It's a little bit of luck in terms of situation multiple times over. But I don't think you could really point to someone who was so undervalued for their time and who proved that ability so well. I want to give the numbers that I mentioned before. So Katie Douglas for a career, she amasses 36.5 wins above replacement. For reference, Becky Hammon, who is, I would say, underrated by wins above replacement, but for her career, she gets 27. For Penny Taylor's career, who goes one pick after Katie Douglas, Penny amasses 29, which for how long Penny played is really good. Lindsay Whalen, who wins 4 titles and almost wins an MVP award, she amasses 41 wins above replacement. So Katie Douglas is at 36.5. Lincoln, of the players who Katie Douglas should have been taken over, basically everyone but Catch, LJ, and Jackie Stiles. I want you to guess who had the most wins above replacement for their career and how many. Again, Katie has 36.5.
Can I go with Tweety Nolan, something like 17?
So Tweety Nolan actually, sorry, my notes are off. Tweety does, and she actually has more than that. Tweety is a very good pick, obviously. Among
Okay, just the 3 picks before her. Probably gonna be Svet then, and it's probably under 12.
It is under 12. It's not Svet. So
Ooh.
of everyone but the 3 in the lottery that I mentioned and Tweety. So you have Kelly Miller, only comes in at 16 wins. That's less than half of what Katie has.
Mm-hmm.
Ruth Riley comes in at 19 wins. That's just over half of what Katie has. Ruth Riley, who plays a very long career. I think she plays 11 or 12 years in the league, and she wins at least 2 titles, if I recall.
A lot, yeah.
I think she might have won all 3 in Detroit. Svet Abrasamova, she only 6 wins above replacement. Marie Ferdinand Harris, 8.5. Coca Miller, the person who went right before Katie Douglas, Coca Miller actually starts in a WNBA final series, 5.5. Katie Douglas, 36.5 wins above replacement. This is in my mind like bang on top 30 player of all time, no question about it. And she goes 10th in the draft, for reasons that it seems that we all agree are pretty stupid.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to talk about her on the series, Just
Great player.
Sorry for ranting.
It's kind of expected at this point with this series.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the setup. But I do feel weird about it every time you guys both go on mute. You're like, all right, Emily, take over for the next 10 minutes. It feels weird. I know that's the point. But...
No, it's fun. I like it.
It's just a good Callie Pondexter isolation.
Yeah,
I just get so excited about this.
Go get a bucket.
Anyways, thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Join the team at the next week for continued coverage of the WNBA, Olympics, etc., etc. Make your second listen Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. We'll be back next week with more WNBA Retrospect. I don't even know who we're talking about next week, but we'll figure that out.
We're talking
Also-
about. Do we have enough film for Rebecca Brunson?
I don't even think we have
Good
enough
question.
film.
Ruth
Who
Riley,
is
by the
next?
way, traded by the Detroit Shock with the pick that becomes Erlana Larkins to the Stars for Katie Matera and a first-round pick that became Tasha Humphrey. So she
Sorry,
was not
one
there
more
for
time?
the 2008. Ruth Riley was not still in Detroit for the 2008 championship because she was traded with the pick that became Erlana Larkins to San Antonio for Katie Matera and Tasha Humphrey.
Great.
Just thought that
Next-
should be on the record.
That's pretty wild. I'm pretty sure next week we're going over Jasmine Thomas because we don't have any film
Ooh.
for. Because we
Really?
don't
If
have
you
enough
have-
films for. We
If
don't
you
have
early
film for Rebecca
2000s
Brunson.
college basketball or late 90s, that also would work. Oh, Katie Feenstra. Yeah. Sorry.
We'll take Temple. Yeah, we'll take DePaul. We'll take Houston. We'll take Temple. Please.
If you have
We'll take Auburn.
1994 Big East women's basketball tape, send it to M. Adler's P.O. Box.
1385 York Avenue, York, apartment 28A. Please.
Or upload it on YouTube.
That too, yeah.
That would be easier for
More
all of us.
CBS broadcasts of Beth Mullins and Doris Burke calling Big Ten basketball games in the 1990s. Send it in.
I miss those
Ads.
I miss those ads.
Oh, so good.
Simpler times.
Simpler time.